I always thought love meant never making me a public punchline. Then he laughed and told the entire table he would rather die than marry me. The room went dead silent. He assumed I was crushed, but I was not listening with a broken heart. I was listening like a prosecutor hearing a confession. He wanted a laugh, but he just handed me the weapon to destroy him. My name is Valerie Ward, and if there is one thing 34 years of life and a decade in logistics have taught me, it is that every disaster has a warning sign. At Crestline Systems, where I work as an operations manager, we call them red flags. They are the subtle tremors in the supply chain, the slight delay in a shipment from overseas, the silence from a vendor who is usually chatty. If you miss the sign, the system collapses. It is that simple. I am paid a very good salary to never miss the signs. Yet, somehow, I missed the sign sitting right next to me for 2 years. His name was Evan Cole. He was 36 years old, handsome in that effortless, slightly rugged way that works well in boardrooms and bars alike, and he had a smile that could convince you the sun had risen just to see him. We were at the Gilded Oak, one of those pretentious, dimly lit gastropubs in Port Haven where the cocktails cost $20 and the menu is printed on heavy, artisanal cardstock. It was the kind of place Evan loved. It was loud, expensive, and filled with people who were desperate to be seen. Evan thrived on attention. He drank it in like oxygen. We were surrounded by his friends. A mix of college buddies and new acquaintances he was trying to impress for some vague business venture he had pitched to me 3 weeks ago. The air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne, truffle oil, and performative success. I sat to his right, nursing a glass of Pinot Noir that had gone warm, playing the part I had perfected over the last 24 months, the supportive, stable girlfriend, the anchor to his balloon. The conversation had turned to the usual topics: golf handicaps, the volatility of the crypto market, and summer rentals in the Hamptons. I was mostly listening, adding a polite nod or a generic comment whenever the spotlight drifted my way, which wasn't often. In Evan's world, I was a functional accessory. I was there to prove he was capable of a long-term relationship, to show he had stability, but I was not the main attraction. Then the dynamic shifted. A man named Greg, one of Evan's oldest friends from his fraternity days, leaned across the table. Greg had already downed 4 bourbons, and his face was flushed with a sloppy sort of confidence. He pointed a finger between Evan and me, grinning like he was about to deliver the punchline of the century. "Seriously, though," Greg slurred slightly, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the bar. "You two have been together for, 2 years now? You guys are practically an old married couple already. When are you going to lock that down? Evan, when do we get to throw the bachelor party?" The table went quiet. It was the standard, uncomfortable question that plagues every couple in their 30s, the social pressure to conform to a timeline. Usually, the partner would squeeze my hand, laugh it off, and say something like, "We are taking our time or don't rush me, Greg." I looked at Evan, expecting the diplomatic deflection. I expected the charm. Evan didn't squeeze my hand. He didn't look at me. Instead, he leaned back in the tufted leather booth, swirling the ice in his whiskey glass. He looked at Greg, then he looked around the table at his audience, his eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a laugh. He treated the question not as an inquiry into our future, but as a setup for a joke. "God, I hope never," Evan said, his voice booming with theatrical horror. He paused for effect, letting the words hang there, making sure everyone was listening. Then he delivered the rest, loud and clear, projecting so even the table next to us could hear. "I would rather die than marry her." Time didn't stop, but it certainly seemed to warp. The laughter Evan expected did not come immediately. Instead, a sharp, jagged silence severed the air at our table. It was the kind of silence that is heavy, physical, and suffocating. I saw Greg's smile falter. I saw the woman sitting across from me, a girlfriend of one of the other guys, widen her eyes and immediately look down at her plate, suddenly fascinated by her half-eaten calamari. Evan, however, was already laughing. He was laughing that deep, chesty laugh of his, completely oblivious to the temperature drop in the room. He thought he had crushed it. He thought he was being the cool, detached bachelor who was too wild to be tamed, even while sitting next to the woman who paid half his rent when his commission checks were late. I sat there, frozen, but it was not the freeze of trauma or heartbreak. It was the freeze of a camera shutter snapping a picture. My mind, trained to analyze data and operational failures, detached itself from my emotions. I didn't feel the sting of tears. I didn't feel the heat of embarrassment rising to my cheeks. Instead, I felt a cold, clinical clarity wash over me. It was as if I was looking at a spreadsheet and finally spotting the error that had been throwing off the calculations for years. I would rather die than marry her. He hadn't just said he wasn't ready. He hadn't said we were figuring things out. He had equated binding his life to mine with death. And he had done it to get a laugh from a man named Greg, who was wearing a shirt that was 2 sizes too tight. I looked at Evan's profile. I studied the crinkles by his eyes as he laughed at his own cruelty. I looked at the hand that I had held during his sister's funeral. I looked at the mouth that had kissed me goodbye that morning. I realized, with a sudden and terrifying precision, that I did not know this man, or perhaps, more accurately, I had refused to know him until this exact moment. The silence at the table stretched on for 5 seconds, maybe 10. To them, it must have felt like an eternity of awkwardness. To me, it was an eternity of calculation. Evan finally noticed the lack of applause. His laughter died down to a chuckle, and he glanced at me, his eyes bright and glassy. He nudged my shoulder with his, a rough, playful gesture that felt like an insult. "Relax, Val," he said, his voice dropping to a patronizing soothe, though still loud enough for the group. "It is just a joke. Don't get that look on your face. You know I love you, babe, but marriage? Come on. We are having fun. We are having fun." He was rewriting reality in real time. He was gaslighting me in front of an audience, daring me to be the crazy girlfriend who couldn't take a joke. If I got angry, I was hysterical. If I cried, I was weak. If I argued, I was a nag. He had cornered me, or at least, he thought he had. But Evan made a critical error. He forgot who I was. He forgot that my entire career was built on managing crises without letting the client see the sweat. He forgot that I was the one who negotiated contracts with trucking unions and navigated customs regulations. He thought he was dating a soft, accommodating woman who would swallow the poison to keep the peace. He was wrong. I took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of stale beer and expensive perfume. I reached for my purse, which was sitting on the floor by my feet. The movement was smooth, controlled. I pulled out my wallet. The leather felt cool and solid in my hand. I opened it and extracted 3 $50 bills. It was more than enough to cover my glass of wine and the appetizers I hadn't touched. I placed the money on the wooden table. The sound of the crisp bills hitting the surface was soft, but in the silence, it sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. Evan stared at the money. "Val, what are you doing?" I stood up. I smoothed out the wrinkles in my dress. I looked down at him. For the first time all night, I really looked at him. I didn't see the charm anymore. I saw a 36-year-old child who needed to humiliate someone else to feel tall. I saw a liability. I kept my face perfectly neutral. I didn't frown. I didn't glare. I gave him the same professional, detached look I gave to vendors who failed to deliver on time. "You do not have to worry, Evan," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough to be heard clearly by everyone at the table, perhaps even the table over. It wasn't a whisper. It was a statement of fact. "I will never trap you." I saw the confusion flicker in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to tell me to sit down, to stop making a scene, to stop being dramatic. But the words didn't come out. He was paralyzed by the absolute lack of emotion in my delivery. He expected a fight. He expected tears. He didn't know how to handle indifference. I turned my back on him. I walked through the crowded bar, weaving between the tables of laughing patrons. The noise of the room seemed to rush back in. a chaotic symphony of chatter and clinking glass, but I moved through it in a bubble of silence. I didn't look back. I knew if I looked back, I might see him rolling his eyes at his friends, or worse, coming after me to pull me back into his narrative. I pushed open the heavy oak door of the Gilded Oak and stepped out into the night. The air in Port Haven was damp. A light rain had started to fall, misting the pavement and reflecting the neon lights of the storefronts. I stood there for a moment on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath of the cool, wet air. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. I walked toward the valet stand, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the concrete. Inside my chest, something had shifted. The bridge had been burned. The contract had been voided. Evan thought he had just told a funny joke to his buddies. He thought he would go home tonight, perhaps a little drunk, and charm his way back into my good graces with a half-hearted apology and a reminder that I was too sensitive. He had no idea that while he was laughing, I was already gone. I handed my ticket to the valet, a young kid who looked tired. He jogged off to get my car. As I waited, I replayed the sentence in my mind. I would rather die than marry her. "Okay, Evan," I whispered to the empty street. "Accepted." I wasn't going to marry him. I wasn't going to argue with him. I was going to do exactly what I did when a shipping route became toxic or a supplier became unreliable. I was going to cut the line. I was going to liquidate the assets. I was going to execute an exit strategy so flawless and so complete that by the time he realized what was happening, he would be standing alone in the ruins of the life I had built for him. The valet pulled my car up. I got in, closed the door, and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking down was the most satisfying sound I had heard in 2 years. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove, my mind already organizing the tasks ahead into a mental checklist. Step 1 was completed. I knew the truth. Now came step 2. Tonight, I was sleeping in the guest room. Tomorrow, I would be disappearing. Evan Cole had wanted to be single. He had wanted to be free of the burden of marrying me. I was about to give him exactly what he wished for, and it was going to cost him everything he had. The drive back to our apartment was a study in sensory deprivation. I did not turn on the radio. I did not connect my phone to the Bluetooth system. I did not want to hear a sad song that would try to force me into tears. Nor did I want an upbeat anthem that would feel like a lie. I just wanted the mechanical hum of the engine and the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers against the glass. The rain had picked up, transforming the city lights into streaky, distorted blurs of red and yellow. It felt appropriate. The world outside was messy and incoherent, but inside the cabin of my sedan, the temperature was set to 70 degrees. The lane assist was active, and I was in complete control. When I pulled into the parking garage, I parked in my usual spot, perfectly centered between the white lines. I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled down. In the past, coming home meant a shift in energy. It meant preparing to listen to Evan's day, preparing to pick up his discarded gym bag from the hallway, preparing to be the audience for his monologues. Tonight, coming home felt like walking onto a crime scene where the body had already been removed, and I was just the cleaner sent to scrub the floors. I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled of lemon polish and stale carpet. I unlocked the door to Unit 402 and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet. Evan was still at the bar, presumably buying a round of shots to celebrate his liberation from the prospect of marrying me. His keys were in the bowl by the door. His jacket was draped over the back of the sofa. A half-drunk glass of water sat on the coffee table, leaving a ring on the wood because he never used a coaster. I looked at these objects, the detritus of our shared life, and felt absolutely nothing. No wave of nostalgia, no urge to smash the glass. It was just clutter. And clutter was something to be organized, categorized, or discarded. I did not go to the bedroom to cry into a pillow. I did not go to the kitchen to pour a drink. I walked straight to the dining table, which doubled as my home office, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark living room with a harsh, artificial blue light. I opened a new document. I stared at the blinking cursor for exactly 3 seconds before typing the file name, Exit plan. It was not a diary entry. It was not a letter to him. It was a scope of work document. In my job at Crestline Systems, when a supply chain is compromised, we do not panic, we reroute, we assess the damage, secure the assets, and cut the dead weight. Evan was the dead weight. I began to type. Step 1. Financial severance. I logged into our online banking portal. We had a joint checking account for household expenses, a decision I had made 6 months ago to simplify the rent and utility payments. I looked at the balance. There was $4,500 in there. $3,000 of it was mine, deposited 5 days ago. $1,500 was his. I did not drain the account. That would be emotional, and it would give him ammunition to call me crazy or vindictive. Instead, I initiated a transfer of exactly $3,000 back into my personal savings account. I left his $1,500. I left him enough to pay his half of the rent for the upcoming month, though I doubted he would use it for that. That was no longer my concern. Next, I went through the recurring payments. The electric bill was in my name. The internet was in my name. The streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO, were all linked to my credit card. I did not cancel them immediately, as that would trigger an immediate notification to his phone. Instead, I logged into each account and removed my credit card information, replacing it with a prepaid Visa gift card I had in my desk drawer that had a balance of maybe $2.50. When the next billing cycle hit in 3 days, the payments would decline, the screens would go black. He would have to enter his own card. It was a small inconvenience, but it was a symbolic one. The subsidy was over. Step 2. Housing. I opened a new tab and pulled up a short-term rental site. I needed a place immediately. I did not want to stay in a hotel. Hotels felt transient and vulnerable. I wanted a fortress. I filtered the search results. Available immediately. Fully furnished. Secure building. I found a studio apartment in the Arts District, about 20 minutes away. It was small, barely 500 square feet, but it had a keyless entry system and a 24-hour concierge. The rent was $1,800 a month. It was pricey for the size, but I was not paying for square footage. I was paying for speed and silence. I clicked Book Now. I uploaded my ID, entered my credit card details, and signed the digital lease agreement. The confirmation email arrived 2 minutes later. Check-in time was at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Step 3. Physical assets. I turned back to my document and started a list of what I would take. This was the most dangerous part of a breakup, the negotiation of stuff. I decided right then that there would be no negotiation. I would take only what was undeniably mine, and I would leave behind anything that was even remotely ambiguous. I typed, my laptop, my monitor, the espresso machine. I bought it. I have the receipt. My clothes, my books, the Dyson vacuum. I looked at the list. It was short. It was practical. I looked around the room at the things I was leaving. The velvet sofa we picked out together. The 65-inch television he insisted on having for football season. The dining table. I realized I didn't care about any of it. I was willing to lose the furniture to gain my freedom. The cost of replacing a sofa was significantly lower than the cost of staying with a man who despised me. Step 4. Legal liability. This was the most critical step. Our lease on this apartment had 4 months remaining. Both our names were on it. If I simply left, and he stopped paying, which was a statistical probability given his financial history, I would be liable for the arrears. I drafted an email to our landlord. Mr. Henderson, I kept the tone professional, devoid of any personal drama. Dear Mr. Henderson, please accept this correspondence as formal notification that I will be vacating Unit 402 effective tomorrow morning. While I understand the lease agreement runs through October 31st, I am requesting to be removed from the lease immediately. I am willing to pay a lease break fee equivalent to 1 month of rent to facilitate this administrative change and absolve myself of future liability for the unit. Please let me know the necessary paperwork required to formalize this severance. Regards, Valerie Ward. I read it over. It was expensive. Paying a penalty to leave a place I was already paying for. But it was a strategic loss. It was insurance. I hit send. I sat back in my chair and looked at the clock on the corner of my screen. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. The apartment was still silent. The rain was still hammering against the window pane. I had untangled my finances. I had secured a new roof over my head. I had defined the scope of my physical extraction. I had initiated the legal separation of our housing. I had done all of this in less than 90 minutes. I closed the laptop. The blue light vanished, plunging the room back into the shadows. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I didn't turn on the light. I stripped off the dress I had worn to the bar, the dress I had put on thinking we were going to have a nice evening with his friends. I folded it neatly and placed it in my suitcase, which I had pulled down from the top shelf of the closet. I packed efficiently: underwear, socks, work blouses, blazers, jeans, toiletries. I moved like a machine. I didn't stop to smell his shirts. I didn't pause to look at the photo of us from Cabo that sat on the dresser. I simply opened the frame, took the photo out, tore it in half once, and dropped it into the wastebasket. It wasn't an act of rage. It was just cleaning up. When the 2 suitcases were full and zipped shut by the door, I changed into a pair of sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt. I climbed into the bed. I stayed on my side, the left side. I didn't hug his pillow. I didn't curl up into a ball. I lay flat on my back, staring up at the dark ceiling. Usually in the movies, this is the part where the protagonist breaks down. This is the moment where the reality of the loss hits and the sobbing begins. I waited for it. I waited for the grief to tighten my throat. I waited for the fear of being alone to set in. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, vibrating clarity. My mind was quiet. The anxiety that had been a low-level hum in the background of my life for the last 2 years, the worry about whether Evan was happy, whether I was doing enough, whether we were moving forward, was gone. It had been replaced by the silence of resolution. I realized then that Evan's cruelty at the bar hadn't broken me. It had liberated me. He had given me the permission I didn't know I needed to stop trying. I closed my eyes. The sound of the rain was soothing now, like a lullaby. I was going to sleep for 6 hours. Then, at 7 o'clock, I would wake up, load my car, and be gone before he even opened his hangover-heavy eyes. I didn't need to have the last word. I didn't need a screaming match. My silence was not a surrender. My silence was the sound of the door closing, locking, and bolting shut. It was the most aggressive thing I had ever done. And for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when I executed the final phase of my extraction. I had slept for exactly 6 hours, waking at 6 o'clock in the morning without the aid of an alarm. The apartment was silent, save for the heavy, rhythmic breathing of Evan from the bedroom. He was sleeping off the whiskey and the adrenaline of his performance the night before. I moved with the silent precision of a ghost. I did not make coffee. I did not shower. I simply dressed in the jeans and t-shirt I had laid out the night before, splashed cold water on my face, and pulled my hair back into a tight ponytail. The movers I had booked through an emergency app arrived at 6:30. I met them at the service elevator. I had requested a silent load, a premium service usually reserved for corporate offices that need to move sensitive documents without disrupting operations. The 2 men were professionals. They didn't ask why a woman was moving out of a shared apartment at dawn while her partner slept in the next room. They simply nodded, lifted my pre-packed boxes, and carried them out. It took 28 minutes. 28 minutes to dismantle 2 years of cohabitation. I stood by the front door one last time. I looked at the key in my hand. It was a small, brass piece of metal that had once symbolized a future. Now, it was just a liability. I placed it on the console table, right next to his wallet. I didn't leave a note. Notes are for people who want to be understood. Notes are for people who are hoping for a dialogue. I had nothing left to say to Evan Cole. His understanding was no longer a requirement for my existence. I walked out, and the click of the latch locking behind me felt like the final period at the end of a long, tedious sentence. By 9 o'clock, I was standing in the center of my new studio apartment in the Arts District. It was small, smelling of fresh paint and industrial cleaner. It was empty, stark, and utterly beautiful. My boxes were stacked neatly in the corner. I had just finished setting up my laptop on the small built-in desk when my phone, which I had placed face down on the counter, began to vibrate. It was Evan. I didn't answer. I let it buzz against the granite countertop until it stopped. Then it started again immediately, and again. I watched the screen light up with his name, detached, as if I were observing a lab rat reacting to a change in its environment. The texts started arriving a minute later. Where are you? Did you go to work early? You didn't make coffee. Val, seriously, pick up. I can't find your laptop. Are you at the gym? Then, a pause. A long pause of about 10 minutes. This was the processing phase. This was the moment he walked into the guest room and saw the empty closet. This was the moment he saw the key on the table. The phone rang again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. I opened the transcription feature on my phone to read his messages, rather than listen to his voice. I did not want his voice inside my head. The first voicemail was confusion mixed with irritation. Valerie, what is going on? Your stuff is gone. The key is on the table. Call me back right now. This isn't funny. I continued to unpack my books, placing them alphabetically on the shelf. The second voicemail, 5 minutes later, shifted gears into anger. You are acting like a child. You seriously moved out because of a joke? Are you insane? We were having a drink with the guys. It was banter. You are blowing this completely out of proportion. Pick up the damn phone so we can talk about this like adults. I paused with a copy of The Art of War in my hand. Banter. That was his favorite shield. Any cruelty could be categorized as banter if he smiled while saying it. If I got hurt, it wasn't because he was mean. It was because I was humorless. It was a perfect trap, one I had fallen into a dozen times before. But not today. I sat down at my desk and opened my email. I drafted a message. I did not address his emotions. I did not defend my sanity. I did not explain why I would rather die than marry her is not a punchline. Subject: lease transfer and utility updates. Evan. Per my previous email to the landlord, I have vacated the premises effective immediately. My name is being removed from the lease. I have paid the lease break penalty, so you are not liable for my portion of the contract, but you will be responsible for the full rent starting next month. The electricity and internet accounts have been transferred out of my name. You will need to set up your own accounts by Tuesday to avoid service interruption. Valerie. I hit send. The reaction was immediate. My phone exploded. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling because I had touched the one thing he actually cared about, his comfort. I had disrupted the infrastructure of his life. You cut the internet? Are you kidding me? His text read, Val, stop being a psycho. Come home. We need to talk. I am sorry if feelings were hurt, okay? I am sorry you took it the wrong way. Just come back and we can fix this. I love you. Don't throw away 2 years over one night. I am sorry you took it the wrong way. The classic non-apology. He was apologizing for my reaction, not his action. Then came the flying monkeys. The first text was from Greg, the man who had asked the question at the bar. Hey, Val. Evan is freaking out. He says you moved out? Look, I know last night got a little rowdy, but he didn't mean it. He adores you. Don't you think you are being a little hasty? We are all worried about you. Let's keep the peace, yeah? I looked at the message. Keep the peace. That phrase is the anthem of enablers everywhere. It implies that the person rocking the boat is the one causing the storm, not the person who steered the boat into an iceberg. They wanted me to come back and absorb Evan's toxicity so they didn't have to deal with his drama. If I was there, I was the buffer. Without me, Evan's chaos would spill over onto them. I blocked Greg. Then a text from Evan's sister. Valerie, please call him. He is a mess. He loves you so much. You know how he gets when he is stressed. He didn't mean to embarrass you. I didn't block her, but I archived the thread without responding. I looked at the timeline of Evan's communication. It was a textbook cycle of grief, but for a narcissist. Phase 1. Denial. Where are you? Phase 2. Anger. You are a psycho. Phase 3. Bargaining. I am sorry. Come back. I love you. Phase 4. Panic. Wait, you actually transferred the bills? He wasn't panicking because he missed me. He didn't ask if I was safe. He didn't ask where I was staying. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He was panicking because the manager of his life had quit without notice. He was panicking because the ATM had stopped dispensing cash and the maid service had been canceled. He called again. I stared at the screen. I felt a flicker of the old urge, the urge to pick up and explain, to make him understand my pain. I wanted to scream at him. How could you say that? But I stopped myself. Explaining is a form of intimacy. Arguing requires two people to be invested in the outcome. I was no longer invested. If I picked up the phone and yelled, he would win. He would have my energy. He would be able to say, "See? She is irrational. She is emotional." Silence was the only weapon he couldn't counter. He couldn't gaslight silence. He couldn't manipulate a dial tone. I sent one final text. It was not an emotional appeal. It was a boundary made of concrete. All future communication regarding the apartment must go through the landlord. All financial ties are severed. Do not contact me again. I blocked his number. The silence that followed was instant and jarring. The buzzing stopped. The screen went dark. I sat in the chair in my new studio. The room was bathed in the gray light of a rainy Tuesday. There was no furniture other than the desk and my mattress on the floor. It was cold. It was lonely. And it was the most peaceful place I had ever been. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that didn't taste like walking on eggshells. I thought about the woman who had sat at that bar last night, the woman who had frozen while a table of people laughed at her expense. I felt a wave of pity for her, but also a wave of pride. She had finally stood up. I looked at the empty white walls. Evan was probably pacing our old living room right now, throwing things, blaming me, calling his friends to tell them how crazy I was. He was crafting a narrative where he was the victim of a hysterical woman. He would tell everyone I couldn't take a joke. He would tell them I abandoned him. Let him. I wasn't managing his public relations anymore. I opened a bottle of sparkling water I had bought at the corner store. The hiss of the cap opening sounded like applause. "I didn't leave to punish you, Evan," I said softly to the empty room. "I didn't leave to teach you a lesson. I left because for the first time in my life, I realized that my dignity is more expensive than your comfort." I took a sip of the water. It was cold and crisp. "I left," I whispered, "to stop being used." I turned back to my laptop. The exit plan document was still open. I scrolled down to the bottom of the list. Step 5. Rebuild. I highlighted the text and changed the font color to bold. The tears finally pricked at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of having survived the escape. I was alone. I was starting over at 34. I had lost the man I thought I would spend my life with. But as I looked around the quiet, empty room, I knew one thing for certain. I had saved myself, and that was worth every single thing I had left behind. Distance offers perspective, but forensic accounting offers truth. For the first 48 hours in my new studio, I did not cry over lost love. I did not mourn the future children we would never have or the vacations we would never take. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by a perimeter of paper. I had printed out 24 months of bank statements, credit card bills, and Venmo transaction histories. I treated the relationship like a failing subsidiary of Crestline Systems. When a branch is bleeding money, you do not ask it how it feels. You look at the ledger. And the ledger of Evan Cole was a horror story written in red ink. For 2 years. I had bought into the mythology of Evan. He was an entrepreneur, a visionary, a man always on the precipice of a breakthrough. That was his brand. He was the CEO of a startup that was always in stealth mode, working on a tech solution for commercial real estate that sounded impressive but remained aggressively vague. He had the lingo down. He talked about disrupting the market and leveraging synergy. He wore the uniform, crisp white shirts, a tailored navy blazer, and a watch that cost more than my first car. I had believed him. I believed him because I wanted to. I wanted to be the supportive partner who stood by him while he built his empire. I thought I was investing in our future. Now, stripped of the romance, the numbers told a different story. I highlighted every transfer I had made to him in yellow. The sheer volume of neon ink on the page made my stomach turn. It started small. A dinner check here because he forgot his wallet. A Uber ride there because his card was acting weird. Then the amounts grew. Transfer, $1,200. Reason, payroll glitch. Paying you back Friday. He never paid me back that Friday, or the next. Transfer, $850. Reason, server costs for the beta launch. There was no beta launch. Transfer, $3,000. Reason, bridge loan until the seed funding hits next week. The seed funding was a phantom. I tallied the total on a notepad. Over 24 months, I had transferred exactly $42,560 to Evan Cole. That was a down payment on a house. That was a master's degree. That was my safety net. Siphoned off bit by bit, disguised as temporary support. But the money was just the surface wound. The infection went deeper. I logged into a shared cloud drive we had used to store photos. I knew Evan kept his business pitch decks in a subfolder there. I had never looked at them closely before. I respected his privacy, but privacy is a privilege for honest people. I opened a folder titled Investor Relations, Q3. Inside were photos, not of charts or graphs, but of us. There was a picture of me and Evan at a charity gala I had paid for tickets to attend. There was a picture of us at a vineyard, smiling and holding glasses of wine. There was a candid shot of me laughing at a dinner party with one of his potential investors. He had included these in a presentation deck. Underneath the collage of our life, the caption read, Stability, Maturity, Legacy. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. He wasn't just using my money, he was using my existence. To the older, conservative investors he was trying to woo, a single, 36-year-old man with a patchy work history looked like a risk. He looked volatile, but a man with a steady corporate executive girlfriend, a man who threw dinner parties and went to charity galas, that man looked safe. That man looked like a good bet. Suddenly, a memory from 6 months ago slammed into me. We were lying in bed on a Sunday morning. The light was soft. The mood was lazy. Evan had stroked my hair, looked me in the eye, and said, You are so safe, Valerie. I love that about you. You are just safe. At the time, I took it as a compliment. I thought he meant I was his sanctuary. I thought he meant I was his peace in a chaotic world. I realize now, sitting on the cold floor of an empty apartment, that he didn't mean safe like a harbor. He meant safe like a bond. He meant safe like an insured asset. He meant that I was boring enough to look respectable, solvent enough to pay the bills, and naive enough to not ask questions. I would rather die than marry her. Of course, he didn't want a wife. A wife has legal rights. A wife has a claim to half of everything. He wanted a prop. He wanted a venture capitalist who slept in his bed and didn't ask for equity. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I couldn't rely on my own analysis anymore. I was too close to it, too angry. I needed a shark. I made an appointment with a civil litigation attorney named Alan Sterling. His office was in a glass tower downtown, the kind of place that smelled of mahogany and billable hours. I sat across from him, my stack of highlighted bank statements between us. Mr. Sterling was a man of few words. He adjusted his spectacles and flipped through the pages, his face unreadable. He tapped a finger on the total sum I had calculated. You have no written contract for these loans? He asked. No, I said, my voice steady. We were living together. It was implied trust. Implied trust is not a legal term. Ms. Ward, he said, not unkindly. In the eyes of the court, without a promissory note, these can be argued as gifts between domestic partners. Recovering the $42,000 will be difficult, not impossible, but difficult. I nodded. I had expected that. I can live with losing the money. I consider it the price of tuition for a very expensive lesson. I am more worried about what else he might have done. Mr. Sterling looked up. His interest piqued. Explain. He used my name and my image to secure meetings with investors. He presented me as a partner in his stability, if not his business. We lived together. We shared an address. I want to know if I am liable. Mr. Sterling leaned back in his chair. Did you sign any loan documents? Did you co-sign for any business credit cards? No, I said, but he has my social security number. He has copies of my passport from when we traveled, and I found this. I slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a printout of an email I had found in the trash folder of his iPad, which was still logged in on my laptop. It was a correspondence between Evan and a private lender. Not a bank, but a hard money lender, the kind with high interest rates and flexible ethics. In the email, Evan had written, "My partner, Valerie Ward, is the VP of Operations at Crestline. Her income covers our overhead. We are solid." Mr. Sterling read the email twice. His expression darkened. "This changes things," he said. "He is representing your income as collateral for his solvency. If he defaults on a loan where he used your financial profile to guarantee his ability to pay. These lenders could try to come after you. They probably won't win, but they can make your life a living hell. They can freeze your assets during discovery. They can ruin your credit score while the courts figure it out." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. "So, I am at risk." "You are exposed," Sterling corrected. "If he is taking money from individuals based on a fraudulent representation of his household income, and you do nothing, you could be seen as complicit. Silence can be interpreted as acquiescence." "What do I do?" "We need to preemptively strike," Sterling said. "We need to put it on record, immediately and legally, that you are not, and never were, a financial guarantor for his ventures. We need to send cease and desist letters to any known associates he has pitched to, and we need to audit his credit report to see if he has opened anything in your name." He paused, looking at me with a serious intensity. "Ms. Ward, this isn't just a breakup anymore. If he is desperate, and people who borrow from hard money lenders are usually desperate, he is going to look for a lifeline. You were the lifeline. You cut the cord. He is going to be drowning, and he will try to grab onto whatever is closest. If you do not sever this legally, right now, you are going to be the one who pays his debts." I walked out of that office into the bright afternoon sun, but I felt like I was walking through a tunnel. The anger I had felt at the bar was gone. The sadness was gone. They had been replaced by a cold, hard survival instinct. Evan Cole hadn't just broken my heart. He had built a Ponzi scheme on top of it. He had looked at me and seen a resource to be mined. I took out my phone. I had a notification from my bank app. It was a low balance alert. Not for my account, but for an old joint savings account I had forgotten to close, one with only $50 in it. I opened the app. The balance was negative $35. He had tried to overdraft it. He was already scraping the bottom of the barrel. I dialed Mr. Sterling's office number. "Start the audit," I said when his assistant picked up, "and draft the letters. I want everyone in this city to know that Evan Cole does not speak for me." I hung up. I stood on the corner of 4th and Main, watching the traffic rush by. I was done being the victim. I was done being the safe girl. Evan thought he was playing a game of chess, but he had forgotten one crucial rule. Never sacrifice your queen to save a pawn. He was about to learn that the queen is the most dangerous piece on the board. The transition from heartbreak to litigation is surprisingly seamless when you treat your life like a logistics project. I spent the next 48 hours in my studio apartment, not wallowing in self-pity, but building a case. If Evan wanted to treat our relationship like a business transaction where I was the silent investor and he was the talent, Then I would treat our breakup like a corporate dissolution. I designated a corner of the floor as my staging area. I had 3 stacks of documents. The first stack was emails. I went back 2 years, searching for keywords like borrow, cover, transfer, and later, I found dozens of threads where Evan had casually asked for financial assistance. "Hey babe, card is acting up. Can you cover the vendor fee? Just need a floating loan for the deposits. We'll wire it back Tuesday." The second stack was bank statements, annotated in yellow highlighter. Every outgoing transfer from my account was matched to a corresponding incoming request from him. The third stack was the most damning. It was a printed timeline. I taped 5 sheets of paper together to create a long horizontal chart. On top, I plotted his business milestones, the pitch meetings, the product launches that never happened, the networking trips. On the bottom, I plotted my financial injections. The correlation was perfect. Every time he had a big opportunity, I had a massive withdrawal. I wasn't funding a business. I was funding a lifestyle that he was selling to other people. But I knew that in a civil court, he could argue that these were gifts given out of love. He could argue that domestic partners share costs. I needed him to admit that these were debts. I needed him to acknowledge the liability while he still thought he could manipulate me. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I drafted an email. It had to be precise. It couldn't sound angry. If I sounded angry, he would get defensive and shut down. If I sounded sad, he would try to sweet-talk me. I had to sound bureaucratic. I had to sound like a woman who was just trying to organize her taxes. Subject: Financial reconciliation for tax year. Evan, I am currently organizing my financial records for my accountant to prepare for the upcoming tax filings. In reviewing my outgoing transfers for the last fiscal year, I have several large sums noted as loans or business advances sent to your accounts. My accountant needs to know how to categorize these. If they are outstanding loans, I need to list them as receivables. If they are business investments, I need equity paperwork. Please confirm that the total amount of $42,560 transferred between January 1st and the present date is indeed a personal loan to be repaid. As indicated in our text history, I have attached a spreadsheet breakdown for your reference. Please reply by end of day so I can finalize my filing. Valerie. It was a trap, baited with the mundane boredom of tax law. I knew Evan. He was terrified of the IRS, and he was terrified of complex paperwork. He would want this problem to go away as quickly as possible. He would also see an opportunity here, if he admitted they were loans. He avoided the conversation about equity. He didn't want me owning a piece of his company. He would rather owe me money he had no intention of paying than give me a share of his ego. I hit send. Then I waited. The response time was a key metric. When I was sending him money, he would reply in 30 seconds. Now that I was asking for accountability, it took him 4 hours. My phone buzzed. It wasn't an email. It was a call. I let it ring. He called again. I declined it. Then came the text. "Why are you emailing me about taxes? Are you serious right now? We just broke up and you are auditing me?" I didn't reply. I had established a new protocol. Written communication only. 10 minutes later, the tone shifted. "Val, come on. Pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. I can't believe you are being this petty. You know I'm good for the money. Why do we need to make this formal?" Still, I did not reply. An hour passed. The sun began to set over the city skyline, casting long shadows across my empty floor. I sipped my tea and watched the screen. He was spiraling. He was realizing that his usual charm offensive was hitting a firewall. Finally, the notification I was waiting for appeared in my inbox. He had replied to the email. "Valerie. Fine, if you want to be like this. Fine, yes, the money was a loan. I told you I would pay you back when the Series A funding comes through next quarter. Stop acting like I'm trying to steal from you. It is a debt, okay? Put it down as a loan. I will sign whatever you want. Just stop making this into a federal case." Evan. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I had been holding. He had done it. He had put it in writing. It is a debt. He had just handed me a confession signed with his own digital footprint. I immediately forwarded the email to Alan Sterling, my attorney. We have confirmation. I typed, proceed with the demand letter. Now that the legal trap was sprung, it was time for the practical consequences. Up until this moment, I had only severed the direct lines, the rent, the utilities, but there were shadow lines, the small conveniences that made his life frictionless. I logged into my Uber for Business account. I had added Evan as a user 2 years ago so he could get home safely from late nights. I checked the history. He had taken a $40 ride to the Gilded Oak the night he humiliated me. I removed him from the account. I logged into my Amazon Prime household account. I saw he had a pair of noise-canceling headphones in the cart, ready to purchase with my default card. I removed him from the household. I called the concierge at the gym where we had a couples membership, paid for by my credit card. I downgraded the membership to a single user, effective immediately. I was systematically turning off the lights in his life. The reaction was visceral. The next morning, my phone began to light up with messages, but not from Evan. They were from the chorus of enablers who surrounded him. First, it was Greg again. Wow. Valerie, cutting off his gym pass? Really? That is low, even for you. The guy is going through a tough time and you are kicking him while he is down. Then, a message from a woman named Sarah, the wife of his business partner. Evan told us what you're doing. Leaving is one thing, but trying to bankrupt him? I thought you were a kind person. I guess we were wrong about you. You are vindictive. I read the messages with a strange sense of detachment. A week ago, these texts would have crushed me. I would have scrambled to explain myself, to prove that I was nice, that I was generous. But now, I saw the anger for what it was. They weren't angry because I was being cruel. They were angry because I was being inconvenient. Evan was a fun friend to have because he always had money. My money. He bought the rounds. He hosted the parties. He was the life of the celebration. By cutting off his funding, I wasn't just hurting Evan. I was disrupting their ecosystem. I was the tap, and I had just run dry. They didn't miss me. They missed the subsidies. I didn't block them this time. Instead, I saved every screenshot. Evidence of harassment could be useful later. I sent one final email to Evan. Subject: Communication Protocol. Evan. Thank you for confirming the debt in your previous email. My attorney will be in touch regarding the repayment schedule. Regarding your personal expenses, effective immediately. All authorized user access to my credit cards, rideshare accounts, and memberships has been revoked. Do not attempt to charge anything to my accounts. Any further attempts will be reported as fraud. Please direct any friends or family members to cease contacting me regarding our private financial matters. Continued harassment will result in a restraining order. Valerie. I closed the laptop. I walked over to the window. Down on the street. Life was moving on. People were rushing to work, buying coffee, laughing on street corners. I felt 1,000,000 miles away from them, but for the first time, I felt solid. Evan was currently somewhere in our old apartment, likely discovering that he couldn't call a car to get to his meeting and that his Amazon order had been canceled. He was realizing that the magic carpet he had been riding on was actually woven from my paychecks. He had laughed when he said he would rather die than marry me. He had wanted independence. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. Welcome to independence, Evan, I whispered. I hope you can afford it. In the absence of truth, rumors flourish like black mold in a damp basement. I had vacated the apartment, severed the finances, and silenced the direct lines of communication. But I had underestimated the sheer velocity of a narcissist scrambling to control the narrative. For 3 days, I stayed off social media. I knew the rule: do not feed the trolls, especially when the troll is the man you slept next to for 2 years. But on the 4th morning, my phone began to vibrate with a different kind of intensity. It wasn't the angry texts from Evan anymore. It was the pitying notifications from acquaintances. Just saw Evan's post. I'm so sorry. Val, stay strong. Breakups are hard when expectations don't align. If you need to talk about it, I am here. No judgment. The phrase no judgment is usually a polite way of saying I am currently judging you. I opened Instagram. My hand was steady, but my stomach turned a slow, cold revolution. There it was, a black and white photo of Evan looking out a window, holding a coffee mug, looking pensive and devastated. It was a masterpiece of staged vulnerability. The caption was long, rambling, and strategically vague. Sometimes, you have to walk away from people you love because the pressure becomes too much. I wanted a partner, not a project manager. I wanted a life built on love, not a timeline built on ultimatums. It hurts to be given a choice. Marry me now or I leave. I chose my freedom. It cost me a relationship, but I kept my soul. Healing starts today. I read it twice. The genius of the lie was breathtaking. He had taken the exact reality, him humiliating me publicly, and inverted it. In his version, I was the desperate, marriage-obsessed harpy who had cornered him, and he was the brave soul who refused to be bullied into a commitment he wasn't ready for. He had painted me as the villain who left because of pride and impatience, erasing the fact that he had said he would rather die than be with me. The comment section was a symphony of support. You dodged a bullet. Bro, keep your head up. The right one won't force you. Respect for standing your ground. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. The urge to comment was overwhelming. I wanted to type, "You humiliated me in public. You owe me $42,000. I wanted to post the screenshots of his begging texts. I wanted to burn his digital shrine to the ground. But I didn't. I put the phone down on the desk. If you react, I told myself aloud, you validate him. If I fought back publicly, it would become a he said, she said, messy domestic drama. I would look unstable. I would look like the bitter ex-girlfriend trying to ruin his reputation. But if I stayed silent? Silence is unnerving. Silence makes people wonder. Silence is classy. Then came the phone call I had been dreading. The caller ID flashed. Linda Cole, Evan's mother. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I knew she would just keep calling. And part of me, the part that was building a case, knew that this call was data. I pressed the record button on my other device and set the phone on speaker. "Hello, Linda," I said. My voice was calm. "Valerie," she began, her voice trembling with that specific frequency of maternal weaponization. "I just got off the phone with Evan. He is distraught. He hasn't eaten in 2 days." "I am sorry to hear that," I said. "How could you do this?" she demanded, the tremble turning into a sharp edge. "He told me what happened. He made a little joke, a harmless joke, and you packed up and left? You threw away 2 years because of your vanity? You know how sensitive he is." Sensitive. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. "Linda," I said, "he told a table full of people he would rather die than marry me. That is not a joke. That is a statement of intent." "Oh, stop it," she snapped. "Men say stupid things when they are nervous. He was feeling pressured. You have been pushing for a ring, haven't you? He said you gave him an ultimatum." "I never gave him an ultimatum," I corrected gently. "I gave him a resignation. He needs you. Valerie." She shifted tactics, her voice softening into a guilt trip. "He is in the middle of closing these big deals. He needs stability. If you abandon him now, and his business fails, that is on your conscience. You are ruining his life over a temper tantrum. Be the bigger person. Call him." I looked at the recording timer ticking upward. 1 minute, 45 seconds. "I cannot do that, Linda," I said. "I am not his mother, and I am not his bank. I wish him the best, but I am done." "You are a cold woman," she spat out. "I always told him you were too cold for him. He deserves someone with a heart." "Goodbye, Linda." I hung up. I saved the recording. I labeled the file. Harassment. L. Cole. Date. Time. I stood up and walked to the window. The city looked the same, but the world felt tighter. They were trying to squeeze me. They were trying to use shame to force me back into my role as the designated shock absorber for the Cole family dysfunction. But they had made a mistake. They thought my silence was weakness. They thought I was hiding. I wasn't hiding. I was pivoting. Evan had decided to fight this battle in the court of public opinion, on Facebook and Instagram, where the currency was likes and sympathy. That was fine. He could be the king of the comment section. I was going to fight in the boardroom, where the currency was actual capital. I opened my laptop and pulled up LinkedIn. I searched for a name, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a venture capital consultant I had worked with 4 years ago on a logistics merger for Crestline. He was serious, sharp, and had zero tolerance for fluff. We had maintained a professional respect for each other over the years, liking each other's posts, occasionally commenting on industry trends. I had seen Evan mention Marcus's name in his exit plan notes. Not my exit plan, but his delusional business plan. Evan claimed he was close to securing a meeting with Thorne Capital. I sent Marcus a direct message. Hi Marcus, hope you are well. I see you are still in Port Haven. I have a brief query regarding a compliance matter involving my personal portfolio. Do you have 15 minutes for coffee today? Strictly off the record. He replied in 3 minutes. For you? Val? Always. Meet me at the grind in 40 minutes. I dressed for the meeting not like a woman who had just been dumped, but like a woman who was about to acquire a competitor. I wore my sharpest blazer, a charcoal gray that meant business. I pulled my hair back. I applied lipstick that was a shade darker than usual. The Grind was a quiet, high-end coffee shop in the financial district. Marcus was sitting in the back, typing on a tablet. He stood up when he saw me, offering a firm handshake. Valerie, he said, you look focused. Everything okay at Crestline? Crestline is thriving, I said, sitting down. This is personal, but it touches on professional ethics, so I wanted to clear the air with you directly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Sounds ominous. I am listening. I folded my hands on the table. I know you are currently vetting early-stage startups for the next quarter. I have reason to believe you have been approached by a company called EVC Solutions, run by Evan Cole. Marcus nodded slowly. I have the pitch deck on my desk right now. We have a preliminary meeting scheduled for next Tuesday. Impressive numbers. Actually, he claims to have significant operational backing. That is why I am here, I said. I need to make a formal disclosure. Evan Cole and I have terminated our personal relationship. More importantly, I have severed all financial ties with him. Marcus paused, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. I see. In his previous drafts, which I saw, he listed me as a strategic advisor and implied that my personal assets were part of his runway. I want to be explicitly clear. Marcus, I am not an advisor. I am not an investor. My income is not his collateral. And if his solvency depends on my bank account, he is insolvent. I didn't say Evan was a liar. I didn't say he was a cheater. I didn't mention the I'd rather die comment. I kept it strictly to the data. Marcus set his cup down. His eyes narrowed. Not at me, but at the mental calculation he was making. That is material information, Marcus said. His liquidity statement leaned heavily on household assets. He presented you two as a single economic unit. If that unit is dissolved. It is dissolved, I said. Irrevocably. I wanted to tell you personally because I respect your due diligence process, and I didn't want my name attached to a risk profile that I did not authorize. Marcus leaned back. A slow, knowing look crossed his face. He had been in this game a long time. He knew exactly what household assets meant when one partner was an executive and the other was a visionary. It meant the executive was paying for the visionary's lunch. You know, Marcus said, tapping his finger on the table, I always wondered how he had such solid operational projections. I assumed he had hired a heavy hitter. Turns out, he was just sleeping with the VP of Crestline. Was, I corrected. Right, was. Marcus pulled out his phone. He typed a quick note. Valerie, I appreciate this. Truly, you just saved me a lot of time next Tuesday. We don't invest in founders who misrepresent their capital structure. It is a character flaw. And in this market, character is the only hedge we have. He looked at me, and his expression shifted from professional to something warmer. "So, you are free agents now? No non-competes? No baggage?" "None," I said. "I am completely independent." "Good," Marcus said, "because I have a portfolio company, a logistics tech firm based in Chicago. But opening a hub here, they are a mess operationally. Great tech, terrible execution. They need a COO. I wasn't going to bring it up because I thought you were tied down here with obligations." My heart skipped a beat. "Coup? Chief Operating Officer." "I have no obligations," I said. "I will send the intro email this afternoon," Marcus said. "And as for Mr. Cole, don't worry. The market has a way of correcting itself when the subsidies are removed." I walked out of the coffee shop into the crisp afternoon air. Evan was currently on Facebook, getting likes from high school friends and his mother, thinking he was winning the war of perception. He thought he was destroying my reputation by painting me as a clingy, marriage-obsessed woman. He had no idea that while he was busy collecting sympathy, I had just cut the legs off his biggest potential deal. He had pitched himself as a package deal. He didn't realize that I was the package, and he was just the wrapping paper. And the wrapping paper was about to be discarded. There is a specific kind of violence that exists in bureaucracy. It is not loud like a gunshot or messy like a fistfight. It is quiet, clean, and devastatingly permanent. It is the violence of a checkbox left unmarked, a signature withheld, or a single sentence in a disclosure form that renders a 100-page business plan obsolete. 3 days after my coffee with Marcus, I received a formal request from a third-party risk assessment firm. They were conducting standard due diligence for Thorn Capital regarding EVC solutions. Because my name had appeared in Evan's preliminary filings as a key stakeholder and household guarantor, they were legally obligated to verify my position. The email was dry and functional. It asked me to confirm the extent of my financial commitment to Evan's venture and to verify the liquidity of the assets he had listed under our shared address. I sat at my small desk in the studio apartment, a cup of Earl Grey tea steaming beside me. I did not call Evan's mother to scream. I did not post a vague status update about betrayal. I simply opened the attached affidavit. Where the form asked for relationship to applicant, I typed none. Where it asked for committed capital, I typed $0. Where it asked for guaranteed assets, I typed not applicable. Then, in the section for additional comments, I wrote 3 sentences. I kept them factual, devoid of adjectives or emotion. I have severed all personal and professional ties with Mr. Cole effective immediately. Any representation of my assets as collateral for EVC solutions is unauthorized and fraudulent. I hold no equity in this entity and accept no liability for its debts. I digitally signed the document. It took less than 5 minutes. I clicked send. That was the moment the ground truly vanished beneath Evan's feet. He just didn't know it yet. He was likely walking into a meeting room right now, wearing his best suit, flashing that dazzling smile, ready to charm his way into a seed round. He would open his pitch deck, he would point to the graphs, and he would have no idea that the foundation of his presentation had just been condemned by the very person he claimed was his safety net. I didn't have to wait long for the aftershock. It happened at 2:00 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. My phone rang. It was Evan. I had blocked his number, but my phone carrier had a feature where blocked calls could still leave a voicemail, and if the caller persisted enough, the emergency bypass would let it through. He must have called 20 times in a row because the phone finally lit up with his name. I stared at it. I was in the middle of reviewing a logistics proposal for my own job at Crestline. My instinct was to ignore it, but my lawyer, Alan Sterling, had advised me that if he contacted me regarding the business specifically, I should answer once, state my position clearly for the record, and then hang up. I swiped green. "Valerie." His voice wasn't smooth anymore. It was ragged, high-pitched, stripping the gears of his usual composure. I could hear traffic in the background, like he was pacing on a sidewalk. "Hello, Evan," I said. "What did you do?" he shouted. "I just got a call from the compliance officer at Thorn Capital. They are putting the funding on hold. They said there is a significant discrepancy in the asset verification. They said you disavowed the guarantee. I did, I said. Why would you do that? He sounded genuinely baffled, as if I had broken a law of physics. You know I need that capital injection to start operations. You know the timeline. If they pull out, the other investors walk. You are torpedoing the whole deal. I am not torpedoing anything. Evan, I said, my voice steady and cool. I am clarifying the truth. You listed my assets as yours. They are not yours. You listed me as a guarantor. I am not a guarantor. I simply corrected a clerical error in your filing. It is not a clerical error, he screamed. We were partners. You said you supported me. I supported my boyfriend, I corrected him. I do not support a man who tells a bar full of strangers he would rather die than marry me. You wanted to be single, Evan. Single men do not get to use their ex-girlfriend's credit score to secure business loans. That is how independence works. There was a silence on the line, heavy and breathing. Then, the tone shifted. The panic evaporated, replaced by a cold, venomous hiss that I recognized from the darkest moments of our relationship, the moments I had always chosen to forget. You think you are so smart, don't you? He said, his voice dropping an octave. You think you can just pull the rug out and walk away? You have no idea who you are dealing with. I built you up. Valerie, you were boring before me. You were invisible. If you ruin this for me, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. I will tell them about your anxiety. I will tell them about your family issues. I will paint you as so unstable that no man will ever look at you again. It was a classic abuser tactic. Isolate, shaming, threaten the victim's social standing to force compliance. A month ago, that threat would have paralyzed me. I would have apologized. I would have promised to fix it just to make him stop looking at me with those dead, shark-like eyes. But I wasn't in that apartment anymore. I was standing in my own space, paid for with my own money, holding a phone that I paid the bill for. Evan, I said, I am not doing anything behind your back. I answered a legal inquiry with the truth. If the truth ruins you, that is not my fault. That is a flaw in your business model. You are a bitch, he spat. And you are insolvent, I replied. Do not call me again. I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally standing my ground. I waited for the crash, for the guilt to set in. But it didn't. Instead, I felt lighter. He had played his ace, the threat of humiliation, and it had bounced off me. I turned my phone over and went back to work. But I wasn't just working for Crestline anymore. 2 days later, I had my first interview with the Chicago-based logistics firm Marcus had mentioned. The company was called Nexus Hub. They were looking for a chief operating officer to oversee their expansion into the East Coast market. The interview was via video conference. I wore a cream-colored silk blouse and sat in front of a blank white wall in my studio. There were no distractions, no clutter, just me. The CEO of Nexus was a woman named Eleanor Vance. She was 60 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that looked like they could spot a rounding error from a mile away. Marcus speaks highly of you, Eleanor said, skipping the small talk. He says you are the reason Crestline hasn't collapsed under its own weight yet. Marcus is generous, I said, but I do enjoy efficiency. Efficiency is boring, Eleanor said, leaning into the camera. I don't need efficiency. I have software for that. I need strategy. We are trying to integrate 3 different supply chains into a single dashboard. It is a nightmare. Everyone is screaming. I need someone who can walk into a burning building, ignore the smoke, and find the exit. Can you do that? I thought about the last 2 weeks of my life. I thought about the exit plan I had executed in 28 minutes. I thought about the forensic accounting I had done on my own relationship. I thought about how I had dismantled a narcissist's financial structure without raising my voice. I am very good at finding exits, Eleanor, I said, and I am even better at putting out fires. We talked for 2 hours. We didn't talk about vision or synergy. We talked about shipping lanes. union contracts, and fuel surcharges. It was the most unromantic conversation imaginable, and I loved every second of it. It was real. It was tangible. It was a language I spoke fluently. For 2 years, I had diminished myself to fit into Evan's shadow. I had played the role of the safe girlfriend, the one who nodded and smiled while he talked about disrupting industries he didn't understand. I had dimmed my own light so his wouldn't look so flickering. Talking to Eleanor, I felt the dimmer switch slide back up. I realized that my value wasn't in being a support system for a man. My value was my brain. My value was my competence. "You are overqualified for your current role at Crestline," Eleanor noted towards the end of the call. "Why have you stayed there so long?" I hesitated. I could have given a standard answer about loyalty or comfort, but I was done with lies. "I was prioritizing my personal life," I said honestly. "I thought I was building a future with someone, and I didn't want my career to overshadow his. I made a mistake. I won't make it again." Eleanor smiled. It was a genuine smile, sharp and approving. "Good. I like people who make mistakes and learn from them. It is cheaper than training them from scratch. I want you to fly to Chicago next week. We will talk numbers." I closed the laptop. I sat in the silence of my studio. The late afternoon sun was streaming in, turning the dust motes into dancing gold. I had spent years building a home for Evan. I had bought the furniture he liked. I had cooked the food he liked. I had dressed the way he liked. And in the end, he had despised me for it. Now, I had nothing but a mattress on the floor and a potential job offer in a city 1,000 miles away. And yet, I felt richer than I ever had. I stood up and grabbed my purse. I walked out of the apartment and down the street to a small neighborhood restaurant I had walked past a dozen times but never entered because Evan hated French food. I asked for a table for one. I ordered a glass of crisp, dry white wine and the steak and fries. When the waiter brought the wine, he asked if I was waiting for anyone. "No," I said, smiling. "It is just me." I took a sip of the cold, crisp wine. I pulled out my phone and saw a notification from LinkedIn. Evan had viewed my profile. I didn't block him there. I wanted him to see. I wanted him to see me rise. While he was scrambling to explain to his investors why his guarantor had vanished, while he was trying to find a new girlfriend to pay his rent, I was about to negotiate a salary that was triple what he had ever made in his life. He had threatened to ruin me. He had threatened to tell the world I was unstable. Let him talk. I wasn't listening anymore. I was too busy building an empire that actually existed. The flowers arrived at the reception desk of Crestline Systems on a humid Wednesday morning. They were not just a bouquet. They were an architectural statement. 3 dozen long-stemmed red roses, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah who loved romantic comedies, buzzed my office with a thrill in her voice. "Valerie, there is a delivery for you. It is huge." I walked out to the lobby. The office was buzzing. People were looking. This was exactly what Evan intended. It was a public performance of penance. If I rejected the flowers, I looked cold. If I accepted them, I accepted him. It was a tactical maneuver designed to force a public truce. I reached into the foliage and plucked the card. I recognized his handwriting immediately. Jagged, hurried scrawl. "Val, I am lost without you. I am in therapy. I am fixing myself. Please, let me buy you dinner. Just 10 minutes. I love you." I looked at the roses. They were beautiful, vibrant, and completely hollow. "I am in therapy" was the new "I am sorry." It was a buzzword he threw out to signal change without actually doing the work. He had likely gone to one session, charmed the therapist, and decided he was cured. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice level, "please call a courier and have these donated to the hospice center down the street. They might bring someone some joy there. I do not want them in my office." Sarah's face fell, but she nodded. "Okay, do you want to keep the card?" "No," I said, dropping it into the recycling bin next to the desk. "Recycle it." I walked back to my office, closing the door. My heart wasn't racing. I felt nothing but a dull exhaustion. He was trying the grand gesture phase of the cycle. He was trying to rewrite the narrative of the last 3 weeks, hoping that $300 worth of flowers would erase the $42,000 of debt and the public humiliation. I sat down at my computer. I had work to do. But before I could open my logistics dashboard, a notification popped up on my private email, the one I used for job applications, not the one Evan knew. The subject line read, "Regarding Evan Cole, information you should see." My finger hovered over the mouse. It could be hate mail from one of his friends. It could be a threat. But the name of the sender was unfamiliar. Tessa Rowe. I clicked open. "Hi, Valerie. You don't know me, but I worked with Evan about 4 years ago at a marketing firm in downtown Port Haven. I have been following what is happening. He's posting a lot on LinkedIn about his struggles and betrayal. I debated sending this, but I saw his post this morning playing the victim, and I couldn't stomach it. You need to know that you are not the first one, and you are not crazy. If you are willing to talk, I have screenshots. Tessa." I stared at the screen. The air in my office seemed to grow thinner. "You are not the first one." I replied immediately, "I am listening. Can you talk now?" 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was a FaceTime audio call. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was shaky, young. "This is Valerie. Is this Tessa?" "Yeah. Hi. Look, I am sorry to intrude. I know this must be a nightmare for you." "I am managing," I said. "Tell me what you know." I was an administrative assistant at the firm where Evan worked before he started his entrepreneurial journey. Tessa began. He was dating a girl named Chloe back then. She was a nurse, worked double shifts. Sweetest girl ever. And it was the exact same playbook, Tessa said. He moved in with her. He quit his job to consult. She paid for everything. His car, his clothes, his bar tabs. He told everyone she was supportive. Then, when she finally asked him to start contributing to the rent after a year, he dumped her. He told everyone she was suffocating him. He told everyone she was obsessed with money. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. It was a script. He wasn't just reacting to me. He was reenacting a scene he had played before. "But that is not why I called," Tessa continued, her voice hardening. "I was on a group chat with him and a few of the sales guys. You know, locker room talk. I kept the logs because, honestly, because they were gross. And I thought I might need them for HR one day. I never used them. But I went back through them last night." "What did you find?" I asked. "I am sending them to you now." My computer pinged. An image file appeared in the email thread. I opened it. It was a screenshot of a text conversation dated 18 months ago, 6 months into my relationship with Evan. Evan Cole. "Just booked the Cabo trip. 5 stars all the way." Friend 1. "Nice. Business must be booming." Evan Cole. "Nah, business is slow, but Val is bonus season." Friend 2. "Does she know you are using her card?" Evan Cole. "She loves it. She likes feeling useful. I keep her around for the credit line. She is boring as hell, but her credit score is 800. As long as she pays for the lifestyle. I can tolerate the marriage talk for another year or 2. She is an investment vehicle, not a wife." I read the text, then I read it again. She is an investment vehicle, not a wife. The words didn't hurt. They cauterized. Any lingering doubt I had, any tiny microscopic voice in the back of my head asking, was I too harsh? Did I overreact? Was instantly incinerated. He hadn't loved me. He hadn't even liked me. He had tolerated me. He had analyzed my utility, calculated my return on investment, and decided I was a boring but profitable asset to hold in his portfolio until a better opportunity came along. The "I'd rather die than marry her" comment wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the truth. He would rather die than marry his ATM machine. You don't marry the equipment. You use it until it breaks, and then you replace it. "Valerie?" Tessa's voice came through the phone, small and worried. "Are you there?" "I am here," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, deeper, colder. "I am sorry," Tessa said. It is awful. I know. No, I said. Do not be sorry. You just gave me the final piece of the puzzle. I looked at the date on the text. It was 2 weeks before my birthday. The birthday where he had given me a pair of diamond earrings. Earrings that, I now realized, he had likely purchased using the points from my own credit card. Tessa, I said, I need to ask you a favor. A big one. What is it? Can I use this, legally, if I need to prove that his financial abuse was premeditated? There was a pause. Tessa was probably weighing the risk of getting involved in a legal battle, but she had reached out. She had taken the first step. Do it, she said finally. He destroyed Chloe. She had to move back in with her parents. She is still paying off the debt he left her with. If this stops him from doing it to someone else, use it. Thank you, I said. You have no idea what this means. We hung up. I sat in my office, the silence heavy and thick. For the past few weeks, I had been operating on defense. I was protecting my assets, protecting my name, protecting my peace. I was trying to escape. But looking at that screenshot, I realized that escape wasn't enough. If I simply walked away, Evan would lick his wounds. He would find another woman, maybe younger, maybe more naive. He would charm her. He would move in. He would drain her accounts. And when she asked for commitment, he would humiliate her and leave her broken. He was a predator, a financial vampire. I thought about the revenge I had planned, leaving him, cutting him off. It felt insufficient now. It felt like I was just removing the food source without dealing with the parasite. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the loop. It was about the pattern. I picked up my phone and dialed Alan Sterling, my attorney. Alan, I said when he answered, we are shifting strategy. How so? He asked. Did he respond to the demand letter? No, but I have new evidence. I have proof of premeditated financial exploitation. I have a written admission from 18 months ago stating that his relationship with me was based solely on access to my credit. That is aggressive, Alan said, his tone shifting from advisor to litigator. That moves us from a simple civil dispute about a loan to potential fraud. It establishes intent. Exactly, I said. I don't just want the $42,000 back. Alan, I want to expose the mechanism. I want to make sure that when anyone types Evan Cole into a search engine for the next 10 years, the first thing they see is a court filing detailing exactly how he operates. Valerie, Alan warned, this will get ugly. If we file for fraud, it becomes public record. He will fight back. He will throw mud. I looked at the recycling bin where the card from the roses lay. I am lost without you. Let him throw mud, I said. I have the receipts. I am not looking for a settlement anymore. Alan, I am looking for a verdict. Understood, Alan said. Send me the file. I forwarded the screenshot. I sat back in my chair. The anger was gone. It had been replaced by a grim sense of duty. I remembered the night at the bar, the laughter, the shame. I remembered thinking I was the victim. I wasn't the victim, I was the witness. And now, thanks to Tessa, I was the prosecutor. Evan Cole had wanted a laugh. He had wanted a story to tell the boys. I was going to give him a story, but it wasn't going to end with a punchline. It was going to end with a gavel. The knock on my door came at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening. It was not the polite, rhythmic rap of a delivery driver. It was a heavy, persistent thudding, the sound of a fist that felt entitled to the space on the other side. I was in the middle of packing a box for my move to Chicago. I held a ceramic mug in my hand, wrapped in newspaper. I froze. I knew who it was. The building had a secure lobby, but Evan was charming, and tailgating a resident through the front door was a skill he had mastered years ago when he forgot his keys. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted his face, but I could see the cracks in the facade. Evan Cole, usually groomed to perfection, looked frayed. His shirt collar was unbuttoned. His hair was swept back in a chaotic wave, and his eyes were wide, darting around the hallway as if looking for an audience. I debated not opening it. I could call the police. I could call the concierge. But a part of me knew that this confrontation was inevitable. A ghost does not just fade away. It haunts the house until you perform the exorcism. I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door exactly 6 inches, blocking the gap with my body. I did not step back. I did not invite him in. "Hello, Evan," I said. He blinked, surprised by my presence. I think he expected me to look ruined. He expected me to be crying in sweatpants, surrounded by tissues. Instead, I was standing there in my work clothes, calm, holding the door like a bouncer at a club he could no longer afford to enter. "Val." He breathed out. The aggression in his knock evaporated, replaced instantly by a performance of exhaustion. He slumped his shoulders. He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that had worked on me for 730 days. "Val, please, I have been looking everywhere for you. I was so worried." "I am fine," I said. "What do you want?" "I want to talk," he said, stepping forward. He tried to push the door open gently with his hand, assuming I would instinctively yield. I didn't move. My foot was planted behind the door frame. The door didn't budge. "We are not talking inside," I said. "Say what you need to say from the hallway." He recoiled as if I had slapped him. "The hallway? Seriously? After 2 years? You are going to treat me like a door-to-door salesman? I lived with you, Valerie. I know you." "You knew a version of me," I corrected. "That version doesn't live here." He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a sharp, frustrated sigh. The sad boy mask slipped, revealing the irritation underneath. "Look, I know you are angry. I know the legal stuff with Thorn Capital got messy. I am sorry about that. I didn't mean for them to call you. It was a misunderstanding. I just need you to sign one waiver. Val, just one paper saying you didn't mean to disavow the assets. If you sign it, I can salvage the deal. I can pay you back the money. I promise. I will write you a check the second the funding hits." It was almost impressive how delusional he was. He was standing on the precipice of ruin, and he was still trying to sell me a bridge. "There is no misunderstanding," I said. "I meant every word in that affidavit, and you are not getting the funding. Evan, Thorn Capital doesn't invest in fraud." The word fraud hit him like a physical blow. His face hardened. The pleading vanished. The eyes that had looked so soft a moment ago turned into hard, black stones. "You are vindictive," he spat. The volume of his voice rose, echoing off the concrete walls of the hallway. "That is what this is. You are bitter because I didn't want to marry you, so you decided to burn my career to the ground. You are acting like a scorned teenager." "I am acting like a creditor," I said calmly. "You ruined my life," he shouted. He took a step closer, invading my personal space, using his height to try and intimidate me. I had everything lined up. I had the investors. I had the roadmap. You just had to sit still and support me for 6 more months, and we would have been set. But no, you had to make it about you. You had to have your little tantrum at the bar. You destroyed everything I built." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the tremor in his hands. And I realized that he actually believed it. In his mind, he was the hero of a tragedy, and I was the villain who had cut the safety rope. He couldn't see that he had been falling for years. I had just stopped catching him. "I didn't ruin your life, Evan," I said, my voice low and steady. "I just turned on the lights. If your life looks like a disaster, that is because you built it out of lies and other people's money." "You are nothing without me," he sneered, leaning in, his breath smelling of stale coffee and desperation. "You are a boring middle management logistics clerk. I gave you excitement. I gave you a status. Who are you going to be now? The lonely spinster with the cat? You are 34. Valerie, you are drying up. No one is going to want you after I tell them how crazy you are." It was his final card, the misogynistic ace in the hole. He was trying to target my deepest insecurities, the fear of aging, the fear of being alone. But he didn't know about Chicago. He didn't know about Nexus Hub. He didn't know about Tessa. He didn't know that I had already read the text message where he called me an investment vehicle. His words didn't sting. They felt archaic, like listening to someone speak a language I no longer understood. I reached into the pocket of my blazer. I pulled out a white business envelope. It was thick. Inside was the formal complaint my lawyer, Alan Sterling, had drafted that morning. It wasn't just a demand for repayment. It was a civil lawsuit for fraud, conversion, and emotional distress, with a text message from Tessa attached as Exhibit A. "I am done listening," I said. I extended my hand and pressed the envelope against his chest. He looked down at it, confused. "What is this?" "That is a notification of legal action," I said. "We are not just suing for the $42,000 anymore. Evan, we are suing for fraud. We have the text messages. We have the chat logs from your old agency. We have the testimony from Tessa Rowe." The color drained from his face so fast it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He recognized the name, Tessa, the ghost from his past, the loose end he thought he had cut. You talked to Tessa?" he whispered. "She says hello," I said. "And she kept the receipts, specifically, the one where you told your friends that I was an investment vehicle, not a wife." Evan froze. He stared at the envelope in his hand as if it were a bomb. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. For the first time, I saw genuine, unadulterated fear. He realized that I hadn't just left him, I had outmaneuvered him. He realized that the boring woman he had mocked was the one who had kept the records. He looked up at me. His eyes were searching for a way out, a joke he could crack, a smile he could flash, but he found nothing but a mirror reflecting his own emptiness. "You can't do this," he said, his voice trembling. "This will ruin me. If this goes to court, my reputation." "Your reputation is exactly what you made it," I said. I stepped back. "Goodbye, Evan." I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. I closed it firmly, with a definitive, mechanical click. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I engaged the safety latch. Click. I stood there for a moment, listening. I heard him breathing on the other side. I heard the rustle of the paper as he gripped the envelope. I waited for him to scream, to pound on the door, to throw himself against the wood. But there was only silence. After a long minute, I heard the slow, shuffling sound of footsteps walking away down the hall. They were heavy, dragging steps. The sound of a man carrying a weight he could no longer shift onto someone else's shoulders. I let out a breath. My hands were steady. My heart was beating with a strong, calm rhythm. I walked back to the packing box. I picked up the ceramic mug I had been wrapping. It was a mug I had bought on a solo trip to Seattle 3 years ago, before I met Evan. It said Coffee and Ambition on the side. I wrapped the newspaper around it and tucked it safely into the box. The confrontation was over. The monster had come to the castle, and he had found the drawbridge raised. He was gone. I looked around my studio. It was filled with boxes. My life was packed up, labeled, and ready for transport. I wasn't just moving to a new city. I was moving to a new tax bracket, a new title, and a new reality where my worth was calculated by my own achievements, not by how much I could endure. I picked up a marker and wrote on the side of the box in thick black ink, "Valerie's office, handle with care." I was ready for the final act. I was ready to watch him fall. Not because I pushed him, but because I finally stepped out of the way. The boardroom at Thorne Capital was designed to intimidate. It was situated on the 45th floor, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the Port Haven skyline, a city that looked like a circuit board of gray and steel from this height. The table was a slab of polished black marble, long enough to land a small aircraft on. I arrived at 9:50 in the morning. I was not wearing the sensible navy blazers I used to wear at Crestline. Today, I wore a tailored white suit, sharp and immaculate, a visual rejection of the mourning period Evan likely expected me to be in. I was not here as a scorned ex-girlfriend crashing a meeting. I was here by invitation. Marcus Thorne had asked me to attend the final vetting session for the quarter's prospective startups, since I was the incoming chief operating officer of Nexus Hub, a company in his portfolio. He wanted my technical assessment of the logistics pitches. He had not told Evan I would be there. I took my seat at the far end of the table, next to Marcus. I placed my phone face down. I opened my notebook. At 10 o'clock exactly, the heavy double doors opened. Evan Cole walked in. He looked like he had spent the last 48 hours trying to reconstruct his confidence from spare parts. His suit was expensive, his hair was perfectly gelled, and his smile was bright, but his eyes were darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. He was holding his pitch deck like a shield. "Good morning, gentlemen," Evan said, his voice booming with forced charisma. He moved to the front of the room, plugging his laptop into the presentation system. Then, he looked down the length of the table. He saw Marcus. He smiled. Then he saw the man next to Marcus. Then he saw me. The smile didn't just fade, it disintegrated. He froze, his hand hovering over the HDMI cable. For a split second, the polished entrepreneur vanished, and I saw the terrified little boy I had confronted in the hallway. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Valerie?" he whispered, barely audible. "Ms. Ward is joining us today as a technical consultant," Marcus said, his voice smooth and indifferent. "She is the new COO of Nexus Hub, and since your proposal involves supply chain integration, we value her operational expertise. Please proceed. Mr. Cole, we are on a schedule." Evan looked from Marcus to me. He looked for a hint of mercy in my eyes. He found none. He found only the cool, professional detachment of an auditor. He cleared his throat. He tried to regain his composure, but his hands were shaking as he clicked the first slide. "Right, yes. Good morning," Evan stammered. "I am here to present EVC Solutions. We are disrupting the last-mile delivery sector." He began his pitch. It was the same script I had heard him rehearse in our living room 100 times. He used all the buzzwords: synergy, scalability, leverage, but without the confidence behind them. The words sounded empty. He stumbled over the projected revenue figures. He mixed up his growth percentages. I watched him in silence. I didn't interrupt. I didn't roll my eyes. I simply took notes. When he reached the slide titled Financial Stability and Capital Structure, he paused. This was the slide where he had originally listed my assets. He had hastily edited it, removing my name, but the numbers were still inflated. He was claiming to have $200,000 in liquid startup capital. "We have secured initial seed funding from private sources," Evan said, sweating now. "We are ready to launch immediately upon closing this round." He finished the presentation and looked at the board members, hoping for applause. There was only silence. Marcus Thorne leaned forward. He didn't look at the screen. He looked at a file on the table in front of him. "Thank you, Evan," Marcus said. "The technology is interesting. However, we have some questions regarding the due diligence report." Evan stiffened. "Of course, I am happy to answer anything." "You list your initial capital as $200,000, Marcus said. "But our audit shows that your personal accounts are currently overdrawn, and the private source you listed in your preliminary application, Ms. Ward, has submitted a legal affidavit disavowing any involvement." Evan turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Well, yes, there was a restructuring of the partnership, but I am in talks with other lenders. The money is coming." "We also have a concern regarding liabilities," Marcus continued. Ignoring Evan's explanation, he slid a piece of paper across the marble table. "It has come to our attention that as of yesterday, there is an active civil lawsuit filed against you for fraud and conversion." The room went dead silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a jet engine in the quiet. Evan stared at the paper. It was the filing Alan Sterling had submitted. That is a personal matter," Evan stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "It is a misunderstanding with an ex-partner. It has nothing to do with the business." "It has everything to do with the business." I spoke up for the first time. My voice was calm, authoritative, and carried the weight of the entire room. Evan flinched as if I had struck him. The lawsuit alleges that the seed capital you claim to have was obtained through deceptive practices, I said, looking directly at him. It alleges that you systematically exploited personal credit lines to fabricate a lifestyle of solvency. Investors need to know that the funds you are asking for might be seized to pay legal judgments. Valerie, stop, Evan hissed, forgetting himself. You are doing this out of spite. I turned to the other board members. Gentlemen, at Nexus Hub, we look for partners who understand risk management. A founder who builds his initial runway on unauthorized debt is not a visionary. He is a liability. If you invest in EVC solutions, you are not investing in a company. You are paying off his personal loans. Evan slammed his hand on the table. This is a lie. She is lying because I dumped her. Marcus Thorne closed the file. The sound was final. Mr. Cole, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze water. Ms. Ward is a respected executive in this industry. Her assessment aligns with our own findings. We do not invest in founders with active fraud litigation. It is against our bylaws. Marcus, please, Evan begged, his voice cracking. I can explain. I can fix it. Just give me a week. We are passing on the opportunity, Evan, Marcus said. Please clear the room. We have other business to discuss. It was over. Evan stood there, paralyzed. He looked at the screen where his logo, the logo he had paid a designer $500 to make using my credit card, was still shining. He looked at the men in suits who were already turning their attention to their iPads, dismissing him as if he were a waiter who had brought the wrong order. He looked at me one last time. In his eyes, I saw the realization hit him. He wasn't just losing a deal. He was losing his audience. He was losing the only thing that mattered to him, the illusion that he was important. You win, he mouthed silently. I didn't respond. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Winning implies a game. This wasn't a game. This was a correction. He unplugged his laptop with fumbling hands. He shoved it into his bag. He walked out of the boardroom, his footsteps heavy and uneven. The heavy doors closed behind him, sealing him out of the world he had desperately wanted to belong to. As soon as he was gone, the tension in the room evaporated. Sorry about the drama, Marcus said to the table, but better to find out now than after the check clears. Agreed, another investor said. Good catch, Ms. Ward. Just doing the math, I said. The meeting continued for another hour. I discussed supply chain integration strategies for Nexus Hub. I spoke with clarity, with passion, and with authority. I was in my element. I wasn't Evan's girlfriend anymore. I wasn't the woman who paid the bills in the background. I was the woman at the head of the table. When the meeting adjourned, I shook hands with the board members. I walked out of the glass tower and into the bright sunlight of the Port Haven afternoon. A town car was waiting at the curb to take me to the airport. My flight to Chicago left in 3 hours. I saw Evan sitting on a bench near the fountain outside the building. His tie was undone. He was staring at the ground, his phone in his hand, likely looking for someone, anyone, to call who would still listen to his story. But the list was empty. I walked past him. He didn't look up. He didn't sense my presence. He was trapped in his own silence now. I got into the car. The driver closed the door, shutting out the noise of the city. To the airport, ma'am? The driver asked. Yes, I said. To the airport. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back through the rear window. I didn't need to see him one last time to know that I was free. The rearview mirror is for checking what is behind you to make sure it is safe to change lanes. I had already changed lanes. I was moving forward, accelerating into a future that belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today, so please drop your location in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed Valerie's journey from silence to power, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who might need to hear it.